Hey people. So I feel obliged to say something about this because it's an important story and I sort of anticipate I would make a video on this one, but I just want to wait until the trip was concluded to say a few things about it. I'm talking about the Biden trip to Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland over this Easter period, and it's a significant one. I mean, the visit of an American president is always important, but particularly with this being the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. So there's a lot of, let's say, poignancy with that and analysis of that. I have not followed this extensively. Actually, in recent days, I've probably been thinking more about Taiwan and the situation there and the growing civil war in Burma than I have about Northern Ireland. And that's typical of me because, sometimes people ask me, subscribers have asked me what I think about this situation in Ulster or another particular angle to that. And it's not that I don't care, and it's not that I never think about it, but I'll be quite honest. I've grown up in England, right? I'm 37. I left Northern Ireland when I was 14 years old. And, Northern Ireland will always, 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 always have a connection for me where I was born. I spent my childhood years there, so it will always have that connection. But I can't say it's the same connection as someone who's living there right now and who's, living there as an adult, as that's where they live. It isn't the same. Um, and as I get older, it does become somewhat more distant. I've no real reason for visiting the province. My grandparents have all passed away. They lived there. The last time I was there was for their funerals, three in a row actually, between 2017 and 2019, and that was the only reason to visit there. Um, my friends are all over the place. Many of them are in the Far East. So I don't really have any personal connection with Northern Ireland anymore. I've sort of connected on social media with some people I went to school with, who I got on okay with, but I wouldn't say any of them are great friends, far from it. Um, it's just so that's the situation for me. It's a fading connection. But when I say fading, it's not that it will never be totally gone, never. So that's the context of my interest. Also, as a journalist, I'm just interested in it as a news story. Um, I keep having to put the caveat as a trained journalist. I haven't started my formal career yet as a journalist, but there's a few things I want to point out with this. Firstly, Biden's speech in Belfast. It was a decent speech. I'm talking about the speech at the Ulster University. What I saw, I may not have seen the whole thing, but there was a bit of an anecdote about apparently some relative down the line was actually of English descent, and the name Biden isn't an Irish name. For all it's made of Biden's Irish American background, Biden itself is not an Irish name. Apparently, it goes back to his lineage, goes back to Nottingham in that sense. Robinette is of French Huguenot descent, his middle name, Joe Robinette Biden. Um, I didn't know that Nottingham connection, but of course, Biden makes a big thing about his Irishness. And the second part of his visit, some would say the part he was more enthusiastic about, was his visit to County Mayo, Ballina, the town of Ballina. And there was all the usual banners, "Welcome home, Mr. President," and all that. Some of this seems a little bit cheesy because every American president gets that. Reagan had it as well. Um, but I think it is true that Biden probably has genuinely more of an Irish connection than any other president since JFK. Um, I don't think that's exaggerated. I think genealogists have apparently found that he is five-eighths Irish, which is a lot more than any of his predecessors except for JFK. So I don't think that's hot air. I think there is a genuine connection there in terms of the ancestry. Um, so when a small town in Ireland, it's not every day the leader of the free world appears. So obviously it's going to be a big thing. Northern Ireland, it's a lot more complex because of the politics. Now, Arlene Foster on GB News was quite scathing. She said basically Joe Biden hates the UK. She didn't mince her words. And there are definitely other unionists who feel that way, and conservatives in the UK who feel that way as well. This is not quite a clear-cut thing. It is true that over the years, Biden has said statements that can be polarizing to the unionist community, but I think some of that has been genuine gaffes rather than ideological positions. For example, he apparently said something about a rugby player and congratulated the rugby player on beating the Black and Tans. Now, this was a gaffe. Clearly, he meant the All Blacks and New Zealand All Blacks. It was a gaffe. The problem is those sort of gaffes, which Biden's become known for, when it comes to the fragile politics of Northern Ireland, that's not ideal. Um, Back in 1998, it was the Clinton administration, of course, and some would say Clinton uh, straddled the balance a lot better than Biden has. Even Tony Blair, who has often been accused of being lockstep with the White House, said Biden needs to tread carefully with it. Um, but I also feel, I do feel that the unionist side can be overtly negative sometimes. This issue with the power sharing situation, I understand there's legitimately held concerns there. But honestly, I think what Northern Ireland needs more than anything is a degree of certainty. Businesses want certainty. The Northern Ireland Protocol earlier this year, the Sunak Protocol, let's call it that, because it's going to be one of the big trademarks of the Sunak premiership, um, was not ideal. It wasn't perfect. But critically, it removes the border in the Irish Sea, um, which unionists should welcome. That's something that was one of their key concerns. I think, if you have a business in Northern Ireland, um, they want certainty more than anything else. And I think the unionists continuing, the DUP specifically, continuing to put up these barriers, I just think it's a case of being, dogmatic for the sake of it. At some point, they're going to have to compromise. I'm not talking about compromising on British identity. I'm not talking about compromising on that. But this is one of the things I really dislike about Brexit. It makes people so purist and so dogmatic that they're not accepting reality. So, the DUP, coupled with the awkward squad, Boris Johnson and co., and other arch Brexiteers, they're just going to say Sunak soft on Brexit, Biden hates the UK. GB News, incidentally, I think they're out to get Biden. Um, I think that, every single segment they have on Joe Biden is negative. It goes without saying everything they say about Trump is, Trump the martyr. I think GB News is absurdly partisan, despite what they claim. They'll occasionally have a token left winger or a token dissident, but GB News is a little bit. It's become what it claimed it wasn't going to be. It's kind of become the British Fox News, and it's like with Joe Biden, this is a guy who does make gaffes, but he hits the UK. Um, well, let's look at his record. It is true that he invited Jerry Adams to the United States at a time when that was seen as politically insensitive. Biden's always denied being a member of the IRA, but I think all Irish Americans, including Joe Biden, need to really, really understand the unionist perspective of basically 30 plus years of IRA terror. And of course, it worked both ways. There was unionist terror as well. But I don't think Irish Americans have ever fully grasped that. And the fact of the matter is, Irish American organizations have blood on their hands with the Troubles. They funded the IRA because of some vague sentimental notions that they were helping their Irish brothers. Many of them had never set foot on the island of Ireland, certainly not Northern Ireland. I think of the film The Devil's Own with Brad Pitt and Harrison Ford. It's a good thriller. It's pretty biased in terms of being, on the Republican side of things. Some could say it romanticizes things a bit. But other than that, it is a good thriller. In a way, the basic synopsis is that Brad Pitt is an IRA man who As a boy, he sees his father gunned down for being a Catholic, and he grows up a hardline IRA warlord. But he has to go undercover. He goes to the United States and meets this Irish American cop played by Harrison Ford, who's a fundamentally good man, but is a bit naive about what he's doing. He's basically shielding what he thinks is this laborer, who's basically an IRA terrorist. And I think probably a lot of that stuff went on. I do think Irish American organizations are very naive about reality in Northern Ireland. Um, and maybe an Irish American president is somewhat an extension of that. I don't think actually Biden's stupid, but I think his gaffes can be unhelpful. But let's look at his record. He hates Britain. Well, Biden supported Thatcher on the Falklands actually as a senator. Biden's record is not black and white, and it isn't consistently anti-British at all. Um, but I don't think it helps that he has sometimes made off-color jokes that maybe lend to this caricature that because he makes this big thing about his Irishness, jokes at the expense of the unionist community maybe fall flat. Now, I'm tempted to say the unionist community should lighten up a bit and see that for what it is, just a joke. The problem is when there's a lot of them and when it's consistent, there are trust issues there. He said to the former Taoiseach, something along the lines of, it's good there's no orange here. We don't allow orange here, or something like that. I forget the precise nature of the joke. But the thing is, Biden's always had this folksy mannerism. It's just his personality. He's done it in American politics as well. Some of the statements he said about Barack Obama over the years. I think this is just the way Biden communicates. And I'm not defending some of these gaffes. As the leader of the free world, he really shouldn't, he should patch that up a bit. He's not the first American president to come out with gaffes. Gerald Ford was known for it. George W. Bush was known for it. Um, yeah, Northern Ireland politics is fragile. I never felt that Joe Biden's visit would change the schism that's going on there. The Times reports that I'll just show you the article actually. I haven't read all of this in extensive detail. Uh, Biden dangles carrot of US cash in effort to win over unionists. I think at some point the DUP is going to have to accept some sort of compromise. This stubborn refusal to form a government in Northern Ireland, it's creating business uncertainty in the province. It's creating general uncertainty in the province. At some point, I think they're going to have to. I'm not saying just put their conviction on the line, but how long can this go on for? Um, a quarter of a century on from the Good Friday Agreement, what does the DUP hope to accomplish with this? Of course, back in 1998, it was the moderates in power. Now it's the more hardline factions. But all the big names from that era, Ian Paisley, Martin McGuinness, John Hume, David Trimble, they're all gone. They've all passed away. In fact, the one sole remaining big name from that period, arguably, is Jerry Adams. He's the only, I think he's about 70 now. He's the only person still left from that era. So the current generation of politicians are younger. Sinn Féin's probably more woke these days than sectarian. So I do think something has changed in that sense. Um, I think that I'll say this, but that I want to get in this point before I forget. When I look at teenagers throwing petrol bombs at the police in the Craigin estate in Derry, it's just depressing. It's just depressing. All they're doing is trashing their own communities. I mean, they're putting lives at risk. Um, they could seriously injure those officers or themselves for that matter. But all they're doing is trashing their community. It causes a mess afterwards. Okay, someone has to sweep up that damage. But what troubles me is there was Sky News reporting she was interviewing one of these young rioters. Of course, he had his mask on and all. He probably wasn't any more than 16 or 17, which meant he would have been born in the late 2000s, long after the Good Friday Agreement. So it's just this herd mentality, this brainless thing of, he was asked why he's doing it, and he said, "Oh, it's just attacking the cops, isn't it? It's what we do." He couldn't even explain why he was doing it. It wasn't like some sort of profound statement of, "Oh, I want a united Ireland and the Brits need to get out." It was just this. It's just this mindless yobbery. But I'll say this, you could be damn sure that there are adults behind the scenes, so-called adults, militants, probably real IRA, you name it. Northern Ireland's a small place. I've no doubt that Jerry Adams and others, probably it's the same on the unionist side. They will know hardliners behind the scenes. They'll be aware of them. And what I find utterly repugnant is these adults are poisoning young minds. Frankly, I think the extremists are still trying to regurgitate the bad old days of the Troubles. I think they're the scum of the earth. I really think that, anyone who wants Northern Ireland to return to the 70s, they need locked up. I think people like that are the absolute scum of the earth because of the amount of suffering that people in Northern Ireland went through on both sides. How can anyone, how can anyone with any sort of integrity want to return to that? I mean, it's the police service of Northern Ireland. It's not the Royal Ulster Constabulary anymore. All these people are doing is destroying their own communities, and it's so sad to see. And it's adults that are poisoning their minds. But I think the approach to it should be maybe don't give them more importance than they deserve. I think it should be treated as common criminality, rather than trying to make them, because they'd love to see themselves as Irish nationalist heroes. They're not. They're just yobs. They're just So I think it should be treated that way, common criminality. And leaders on both sides need to back the police if they really, really want the future. Even if Northern Ireland's going to be part of a united Ireland, it still needs to, even if that is going to happen, and it's possible, it's very possible, but it's in the interest of everyone that there is not a return to violence. If there is going to be united Ireland, ironically, back in the beginning of the Troubles, the issue was about civil rights for Catholics. Ironically, what could actually happen is if if it goes to that trajectory, if there is a united Ireland, then the unionist community would need to be reassured that they're not going to face discrimination, that they're not going to face those issues the Catholics faced back in the early 70s. But there is a lot of ghosts of Northern Ireland. There's a lot of, you know, Northern Ireland didn't have verbatim Truth and Reconciliation Committee in the same way. There has been various different bodies to look at unsolved murders and the Troubles. And with Northern Ireland, it just feels that there's a lot of ghosts there. And there are people who have suffered for years and years and years. They never got justice on both sides. Um, and there's so many things to say about this, but I won't. I'm going to wrap this up as the video will be too long. But I never thought that Biden's visit to Northern Ireland would solve the problems. But I think, this is why I don't miss Northern Ireland. The pettiness and the parochialism of the politics. It's just so dogmatic. And it really feels like there are people in a position of power who could do something about this, and they're not. I mean, those rioters, you could be damn sure that they're not just going out of their own because they're bored. Maybe that's part of it. Okay. I mean, in England and Scotland and Wales, young offenders, they always come up with the excuse, oh, there's nothing to do around here. In Northern Ireland, there's that component, but there's also the sectarianism. So, what I'm saying is it needs to be treated as common criminality, antisocial behaviour. The sectarian aspect is there for sure, but I think it's sort of an excuse these days. I really don't think a 16-year-old rioter in Derry has bothered, reading up on Irish history or, actually looking into the academic side of that. If you asked him or her, it's mostly young men, if you asked them, why are you doing this? Why are you throwing petrol bombs at the police? They probably couldn't give you a straight answer. I'm bored. It's something to do. I don't like the police. But they couldn't give you a sort of analysis of why they want the Brits out or anything for that. I'll say this, at least the original IRA, whatever you think of them, were a sort of revolutionary movement. I mean, against what was British imperialism in Ireland as they would see it. Um, Even the IRA and the Troubles, I'm talking about the main IRA, they've done some appalling things. They had a lot of civilian blood on their hands, but at least there was a sort of some sort of agenda behind it. With this, there's just nothing. It's just mindless street thuggery. It's just mindless vandalism, um, and it's just depressing to see. And of course, there's unionist equivalents. Um, so honestly, I do not miss any of that stuff, and I think there's a. I want to be careful how I say this. I don't want to generalize, but I think there are too many people in Northern Ireland who just have a very, very parochial worldview. I mean, haven't been outside the province. Maybe some of them on the Unionist side has been to Great Britain. Maybe some of them on the Nationalist side have been to the Republic. But I'm thinking, go out and see the world. You know, go to other countries, see what their history is, see what just broaden your horizons. This is what annoys me about Northern Ireland. It's just so parochial sometimes. Um, and that's something I do not miss. And I think both sides are as bad as each other in that sense. I mean, the good news is Northern Ireland's not where it was during the height of the Troubles. In that sense, the Good Friday Agreement was a success. There were very difficult decisions made by leaders like Tony Blair um, and the Republican leaders at that time. But and it's something the president said in his speech, peace was never a foregone conclusion. And today, it remains fragile. I don't think the situation will ever get so bad that it'll be equivalent to the height of the Troubles in the 70s, where there were tit for tat atrocities and bombings, and I don't think it'll ever get that bad. But there is still a minority of extremists there. Horrible little shits, in my opinion, who just want to bring Northern Ireland back to the dark past. I really think I have nothing but contempt for them because why would they do that? Why would they bring it back to the Dark Ages? I mean, the nationalists realised some time ago that bombs and bullets were not going to get them a united Ireland. They accepted that after the Good Friday Agreement. Of course, there were breakaway factions. Now the unionists also cannot be stubborn. They cannot say, well, we're just never going to work with this power sharing agreement. Politics often involves compromise. You don't always get exactly what you want. And I think what the people of Northern Ireland, what most of them need, is stability. Certainly, businesses. It isn't just about the troubles; it's also about economics. I think they need stability. Biden, yeah, his gaffes don't help, but I don't think he actually hates the United Kingdom. I think that's a little bit unfair. Um, anyway, that's my take on it. I felt I had to say something, but I just what I'd really like to see in Northern Ireland is some stability for everyone. And I'd like to see these jobs treated as common criminals. You know, how are young offenders treated in England? They're made to do community service or whatever. You know, I personally think some of it's too lenient, but I think it should be treated that way. Um, of course, they're wearing balaclavas. It's going to be very difficult to identify them. They'll probably never face any sort of actions. It's like a hobby for them. But there will be people in Sinn Féin and on the unionist side who will know these extremists, and they can do something. They can put pressure on them to say, "Okay, you're poisoning these young minds. You're getting them to go out and attack the police. Either rein it in, or we'll expose you." Because ultimately, they're probably a hardcore of 100 or more. I don't think it's going to be very many people, but it's just disgusting to see them poisoning these young minds. They're ruining their lives. And for what? For a cause that they don't even understand, that they don't really, I guarantee you, if you ask one of those young rioters why they're doing it, they won't be able to give you a comprehensive answer. They might say something like, "Oh, we want the Brits out," or "It's just so I feel like it." I mean, there is no There isn't even an ideology there. It's just brainless criminality, and it's so sad to see. So yeah, I'm sorry there's a bit of a negative overtone for this video. It's not all bad. Northern Ireland is a lot better than it was during the Troubles. I think the Northern Ireland Protocol, it's not perfect. It was never going to be perfect, but importantly for Unionists, and they should consider this, it takes away the border in the Irish Sea, because that was always their big concern. I think it's probably the best compromise under the circumstances. And Brexit purists will say, "Oh, but there's still leave some of the EU in Northern Ireland." At some point, they're going to have to be realistic. Brexit purists get on my nerves. They'll say, "Okay, well, Northern Ireland's part of the United Kingdom. Northern Ireland deserves um, all the independence that the rest of the UK had. But Northern Ireland is different from the rest of the United Kingdom because of its politics." And for that reason, I think the unionists have to be a little bit more realistic. I'm not saying for a second they should compromise on their conviction. Yeah, they're British and Northern Ireland's part of the United Kingdom, but this thing about refusing to get into power sharing at all, at some point they're going to have to compromise. I'm not saying sell out, I'm just saying how long are they going to keep the people of Northern Ireland having this uncertainty? Anyway, that's my thoughts on it. I'm sure there's a lot more to say. Just one quick caveat if you've made it this far, or not caveat, just a footnote. Biden met President D. Higgins of the Republic of Ireland, and the combined age of the two presidents is 161. So that must be a near record for two world leaders.